About 13 years ago, Fire Emblem Awakening took the world by storm. And while there were many reasons that this game appealed to so many new players, it's pretty undeniable that a big selling point was its cast of characters, who were so popular that several of them got ported over into the sequel, Fire Emblem Fates. One of those characters was the standoffish mercenary Severa, who joined the Nor army under the disguise of Selena as one of Camilla's 2 retainers. While likely the most noteworthy aspect of her Rev appearance is the ability to become her own grandmother, as a unit, Selena also has a pretty interesting toolkit. This video is part of an ongoing series with the goal to do a deep dive into every single playable unit in Fire Emblem Fates Revelation. Yes, you know, despite the fact that the game's reputation for being terribly limited, each unit that everyone has can contribute to your team, but unit fates are highly customizable, and this is so race has the options that are available on many fronts. It's also in fact, all the games in fact, in fact, it's but I do believe that everyone is exceptional, and how I'm serious with let's dive into our unit review. God, that's either the worst or best series name I've come up with. There's no middle ground. Yeah, that long-winded introduction was getting old, wasn't it? Selena joins your army after beating Chapter 12, meaning the first main story chapter she can be deployed on is 13. She's a level 10 mercenary with pretty mediocre stats. Almost all her relevant stats hover around the low teens. 12 strength, 11 defense, 12 skill, and 15 speed as the highest non-HP stat she has. Though unimpressive looking at first, these stats are actually pretty good for Conquest Chapter 10 when Selena joins. But unfortunately, in Rev, enemies are much tougher to take down, and even if they weren't, Selena's 3-chapter availability deficit means that she's facing off against tougher foes simply by virtue of being later in the campaign. As such, I would say her stats are actually quite bad for her join time in Revelation. For context, the Samurai Hinata, who joined 2 chapters prior, has a very similar stat spread and is considered pretty middling even for his join time. And he has the advantage of C-rank swords, which Selena lacks. Because yes, Selena is one of the unlucky units who received a nerf in the transition from Conquest to Revelation. In Conquest, Selena has D-rank swords, but she's halfway to C. But in Rev, she starts at D-rank with 0 experience. And this is particularly relevant because Rev actually gives you early access to some high-ranked swords. One of the best parts about Hinata is the fact that he can use the Killing Edge and Dual Katana for free with no investment. Heck, there's even a free steel sword that he can use to supplement his damage output if you need. Selena, on the other hand, is stuck using bronze and irons for the most part, although you do get access to a free armor slayer, and this can be nice if you want her to fight the enemy armors. I mean, she'll be at weapon triangle disadvantage, but it's something. Starting with Strong Riposte can potentially help in the damage department, but it only works on enemy phase, and while Selena does have the bulk to reasonably live one hit, she's usually going to need a heal afterwards in order to not die to the next enemy. So you can't exactly leverage Strong Riposte against hordes of foes on enemy phase. While her bases are underwhelming, Selena's growths are actually pretty alright. I wouldn't say they stand out super much, but her emphasis on speed and defense means that she can be a relatively good physical tank, and her strength is also not half bad once she starts leveling up. The thing is, her base performance is pretty bad, and while she does grow alright, it's not enough in my opinion to justify putting up with her abysmal start, especially when she joins surrounded by so many better units. Camilla and Baruka join at the same time as her, and Chapter 13, the first map where you can deploy her, also features Keaton and Kaden, both of whom are incredibly powerful at least in the short term. You also just recently recruited a slew of powerful units in Reina, Opero, and Takumi, and you're only 2 chapters from getting Silas and Shura as well. With such a large cast and such a tight deployment crunch, it's difficult to justify putting any energy into training Selena. But not impossible to justify, because Selena does have one pretty interesting selling point. And that is how she's perfectly positioned to be an ideal Rallybot. Selena's base class of Mercenary gives her access to Bow Knight's Rally skill, and her Heartseal class of Sky Knight means that she can also pick up Rally speed. She has a fast friendship with both Baruka and Camilla, giving her easy access to the Wyvern class for Rally defense, and you can round these off with a marriage of your choice, either Jacob for Rally resistance, or, in my opinion, the better option, Arthur or Keaton for Rally strength. Strength, speed, and resistance go very well together as a strong offensive trio, and while defense generally doesn't come up for player-phase strategies, it can if you're fighting against any 1-2 range foes such as ninjas and need to be able to eat a counter. If you're trying to turn Selena into a Rallybot, I think Falconite is probably a good final class for her. It has increased movement and flight for mobility, plus on turns where you're not rallying, you can heal, which is less useful than on magically oriented units, but honestly, because the staff formula is so unfavorable in Fates, it's not as big a difference as you would think. Now, of course, Selena isn't the only unit in the cast who is well positioned to pick up a slew of rallies. In fact, in previous videos, I've highlighted Corrin and Sakura's potentials to slot into the Rallybot build. But what makes Selena appealing over those royal candidates is that she doesn't have too much better to be doing. If you put your avatar into the Rallybot build, then you are sacrificing potentially one of the strongest combat units in the cast. And if you put Sakura into the Rallybot build, then you are potentially giving up a powerful mage. But if you put Selena into the Rallybot build, well, you're giving up a mediocre sword unit. All other factors being equal, the third scenario sounds ideal. But, of course, this comes with a catch-22. You see, for a Rallybot to pick up all of the rallies they need, you're going to have to get a large number of promoted levels. 5 for the first rally, and then 3 for every additional rally after that. Thanks to the way internal levels work, you can speed this process up by early promoting, and Selena being level 10 means that she can immediately do this before preps on her first map. But even still, in order to get these promoted levels, the ideal strategy is to get kills against promoted enemies. One of the reasons that I especially like the Rallybot Corrin build is if you early promote them, they can fill a sort of pseudo-Jagan role, trading their late game potential for early game dominance. And because an early promoted Corrin has no trouble killing the pre-promotes of Rev's mid-game, they can start building up their level and gaining these rally skills in order to still be useful in the late game once their combat has fallen off. In contrast, if you instant promote Selena for Chapter 13, she is still going to be struggling to secure kills against enemies that give her any relevant amount of experience. Like, for context, in Chapter 13, if you instantly promote Selena to Bow Knight and give her an unforged bronze bow, she needs a Camilla dual strike and Rose's thorns in order to one-round the unpromoted ninjas, which give her like 7 experience on kill. Oh, and because they counterattack her, you're also going to need to heal her up in between each round of combat because she's getting brought down to a third or less HP. And upon heartsealing to Falconite, this problem is even worse because she's stuck using lances and the worst class stats. Of course, if your team desperately needs the strength, skill, defense, speed combination, then it can potentially still be worth struggling through this terrible training arc. But it's worth mentioning that Sakura and Corrin are not the only competition Selena has for the role of Rallybot. Selena's fellow Awakening veteran Laslow serves as a pretty tempting side grade to her. Olivia's son only has rally skill in his base kit, so he's always going to be stuck at 3 rallies instead of Selena's 4, but his personal skill, Fancy Footwork, gives +1 to speed and strength and stacks with other rallies. This means that through Keaton friendship and either Azura marriage or Selena marriage, Laslow can get access to a +4 skill, +5 strength, +5 speed rally, in contrast to Selena's +4 skill, +4 strength, +4 speed, +4 defense. Additionally, because of Laslow's higher starting level and therefore better stats, he is significantly easier to get promoted levels on. While you're required to baby Selena in order to get her kills, Laslow really feels like he can contribute on his own. Of course, this higher level, alongside his later join time in Chapter 17, means that Laslow is slower to get all of the rallies, both because his higher internal level does cut down on the experience he gains, and because Selena has a jump start on building supports, meaning she will get the mandatory classes faster than Laslow does. My personal preference is still a Rallybot Laslow over a Rallybot Selena, but depending on your playstyle and your team composition, either one of them could slot in well for you. But unfortunately for Selena, potential Rallybots don't stop there. In fact, I think the biggest argument against training Selena up in order to make her a Rallybot is the existence of the second generation. You see, while Gen 1 units have to get a large number of promoted levels in order to acquire all of the rally skills, Generation 2 can kind of cheat. If you can get both parents to promoted level 5, then each of them can pass down a rally, meaning that a child unit can start with 2 rallies already learned. And for those that are lucky enough to start in a class that earns a rally on its own, such as Shigure, Percy, or Mitama, then they can potentially offspring their way to 3 rallies immediately. Offspring seals bring a child to level 4 if you recruit them in between chapters 19 and 20, and I think this is the ideal time both to recruit a child unit and to have your Rallybot online. Shigure is probably the ideal Gen 2 candidate since he starts out with speed and res, and every team should be using Azura, so it's not like you have to go out of your way in order to get her married. But if you're willing to deploy a suboptimal father just to get access to their kid, Percy is also a pretty top-tier Rallybot, with innate access to strength and defense, and a variety of mothers who could offer him other rallies to round out his kit. I'll be honest, if I'm trying to get a Rallybot online by Vala, then I'd much rather route a weird pairing than try to train Selena during the mid-game stretch of Rev. But it's not all bad news for our favorite redhead, because as it turns out, if you're trying to make a Gen 2 Rallybot, she's a pretty good candidate for mom, since she can grab rally speed to pass down via inheritance, and she passes the mercenary class to whoever the lucky child is so that they can get skill off of Bonite. With Selena as their mother, both Soleil and Percy are able to replicate the speed, defense, strength, and skill quadrangle that Selena herself is famous for. But if you're willing to settle for only 3 rallies, then Valoria and Sophie are also very competent Rallybots with Selena as their mom. Although, considering the way that Selena talks to Silas in their S-rank support, maybe it's not the best idea to tell her that Sophie potentially outclasses her in the Rallybot role. If you're just looking for the best way to use Selena in Rev, then I would say either as your Rallybot or as the mother of your Rallybot is the ideal role for her. But if you're a dedicated fan, and I know she has some since she won the survey to make it into Fates, then you're probably not very satisfied with that answer. So let's look into options that put Selena in the spotlight rather than the supporting role. The most straightforward path is the same one Selena likes to take in Conquest, completing one of her fast supports in order to unlock the incredibly powerful Wyvern class. Selena's personal growths actually supplement Wyvern's class growths quite well, and she ends up having good strength, defense, and speed, alongside flight and axe access, one of the better weapon types. Wyvern Rider granting the +2 strength skill also means that she gets her damage off the ground much faster than she would in Mercenary, especially since you can combine it with Strong Riposte for a total damage stack of +5 per hit on a unit who is now bulky enough to take hits and double foes. She's still going to need some training and babying before she can hold her own, but this is a much better prospect than Selena has as a mercenary. The only downside is she loses her sword rank, but you have plenty of other sword units to use, and Selena's D rank base swords isn't that impressive anyway, as we previously discussed. Now, obviously Selena isn't the only unit who can get access to Wyvern through supports, but she only takes 4 chapters to do so thanks to the way that fast friendships work, and her stats feel really fine-tuned to take full advantage of this class line, more so than any other unit in the cast. But if you want to use Wyvern Selena, then Conquest is right there, so let's look into her Rev exclusive options. As it stands, she gets 3 cross-route supports: Setsuna, Hinata, and Tsubaki, although that last one is basically useless for her since she already has access to the Sky Knight line. It can be useful for Tsubaki and Kaldori if you want to use them, but this is Selena's video. If you're interested in how the mercenary class can help the perfectionists, then I already made a video on Tsubaki and Kaldori, linked below. But since we're focusing on Selena, I want to take a look at her other 2 cross-out options, Samurai and Archer. Of these 2, Samurai is definitely the most straightforward. It gives Selena access to another sword class and lets her combine skills to be a pretty effective defensive sword user. Mercenary already grants access to Strong Riposte and Soul, which incentivize enemy phasing with Selena. But Vantage from the Samurai line means that she will also strike before taking hits if she's at 50% or less HP, meaning that she has additional opportunities to build up guard gauge or trigger Soul to recover and face more enemies. The high-level skills of Hero and Swordmaster are also quite good. Axebreaker reducing the hit rate of enemy axe users, and Swordfair giving you a flat damage boost when using swords. And even Swordmaster's level 5 skill, Astra, can potentially be useful, even if it is a bit overrated in my opinion. See, Astra gives you a chance to land 5 attacks at half power instead of just 1. This is going to have the effect of killing most enemies because, as it turns out, a 2.5 times multiplier is a pretty big damage boost. But it also means you get a full guard gauge out of it, which further supplements the defensive build that Selena is going for. Since Samurai comes from a marriage, that means Selena is also free to grab Cavalier from Parry Friendship, granting access to the skills Elbow Room, Shelter, and Defender, all of which are quite useful. If you want, you could also grab Aegis for a little bit of extra defense as a proc chance, and Good Fortune and Camaraderie help recover HP, which is nice to have on tanks, but honestly, I think these 3 skills are pretty low value, and Selena's usually going to have 5 skills that supplement her tank build before dipping into any of them. Of course, if we're looking into defensive builds that involve the hero class line, then we have to talk about Soul Ninja. I previously made a video on Soleil that dives deeper into why Soul Ninja is so good, so if you want more information, that's linked below. But the TLDR is that getting unrestricted 1-2 range combines very well with both the Soul skill and guard gauge to allow you to take on a large number of units, assuming you have a good speed and defense stat. And Selena does specialize in both speed and defense. Since she already starts out with Soul access thanks to the Mercenary class line, Selena only needs to marry one of the 2 potential dagger-wielding husbands, Jacob and Kaze. Kaze is definitely better, Ninja is just a better class than Butler, and it allows Selena to get into a dagger class before promoting, but if you are having someone else marry the Green Christmas Ninja, then Jacob will make do, I guess. Either way though, Selena is going to want to supplement her damage with some extra skills, such as Strength +2 from Wyvern or Elbow Room and Defender from Cavalier. This is also part of why I think the Kaze marriage is better, because Master Ninja gets access to Shuriken Fair, which adds an additional 5 damage on top of the other damage boosting skills Selena can gather. Overall, Selena's stat spread is actually pretty well suited to the Soul Ninja role. I don't think she's the best candidate in the cast, but she performs a lot better than other ones such as Charlotte and Soleil. The only downside is that Kaze marriage is actually a pretty valuable resource to expend in order to create this build, since as a dual route character, Kaze is the best way for Norians to gain access to the ninja class line. If only there were some way for Selena to get access to the ninja class without marrying someone whose base class is ninja. Well, good news! Actually, there is, because since Laslow's base class of Mercenary is also Selena's base class, this means that if the two of them marry each other, Selena passes Sky Knight onto Laslow, and Laslow passes Ninja onto Selena. And if you remember from a few minutes ago, Laslow actually really wants access to Sky Knight through marriage, since it can allow him to be a Rallybot alongside fancy footwork. So if you're trying to turn Selena into a soul ninja, then this can potentially be a marriage that benefits both husband and wife. And heck, even Soleil appreciates being able to access the Kinshi Knight class if she wants to go into a strength-focused bow build. For that reason, I actually really like this pairing. But of course, since Laslow joins in Chapter 17, it can be a pretty slow one to get off the ground. So if all you want is Soul Ninja Selena, Kaze might still be the better choice thanks to his earlier join time. On the topic of builds that take a while to get going, let's touch upon Selena's last notable support option, Setsuna. Setsuna offers the ever-valuable Archer class, one of the better classes in Revelation. Selena already has a couple of strong bow classes in her base kit, a Bow Knight from Mercenary and Kinshi Knight from Sky Knight. However, adding Archer to the mix means that she not only can have Sniper as a third powerful bow class, but also gives her nearly free access to Quick Draw, since she'll get it just from being a Kinshi Knight, and if Selena is being bow focused anyway, she probably wants to be a Kinshi Knight during the Earl of Vala chapters, where flight is at a premium. The only big downside about this particular build is early on Selena's strength can struggle, so going into Sky Knight or Kinshi Knight can just exacerbate those damage problems. And since Setsuna joins so late, you don't get access to Quick Draw until you've already conquered the hurdle of low damage. The extra unfortunate thing is that both of Selena's Wyvern options take up her friendship slot, so you can't dip in for Strength +2 and then still get Archer from Setsuna. You gotta pick one or the other, and if you're trying to be bow-focused, Archer is definitely the way to go. I guess you could solve this problem by marrying a male Corrin who has either Archer or Wyvern themselves, but you could solve most units' class problems by marrying the correct Corrin, so I tend not to factor Corrin marriage in when making these analyses. But even if you are planning on marrying Selena, I can't really think of any classes to give her that I haven't talked about yet. Early access to Archer is nice, and getting Ninja without needing to wait for Laslow is also pretty cool, so I guess go for one of those, or marry her with a Fighter Corrin in order to complete the Rally build. So really all that leaves us with is the tier list, and this placement is a pretty easy one. I'm putting Selena in the bottom of C tier right underneath Kana, for basically the same reasons that female Kana got elevated that high to begin with. Selena as a Rallybot is cool, but in my opinion, it's just far too much work for something you can get much more easily if you're just good at your pairings. Going the combat route, the Ninja, Archer, and Wyvern builds are all cool, but they're not especially unique, and you could get competent Wyverns, Archers, and Ninjas much more easily than by babying Selena. I can potentially see a world where Kana and Selena gets moved down to D with the disproportionate investment to payoff, but honestly, I do think the payoff of being a Rallybot is worthwhile, even if it is replicable elsewhere with easier setups. But that's just my opinion. I know Selena is a very popular character in both games she appears in, so ranking her this low will probably ruffle some feathers, and if you are upset by her being in low C, feel free to let me know in the comments why you believe she deserves to be elevated. This tier list is ever evolving, so if someone makes an argument that I agree with, I will reconsider her or any other unit's position. But until then, I should say thank you to my patrons. Thank you to Key the Iron Idol, Calamity Callie, Anom Wanderer, A Clever Username of Lies, Jackson McMahon, Saren Gurlixy, Tailored Muffin, Klon, Andu, Len, Gameboo, Karosa, Fyrant, Your Doctor, Frozen Helm, Girl Boss, Lizard Bongwater, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Jaden, Reflect, Formless Thing, Dylan Solis, Guiji555, Smaz Ruby, Zycrom, Robin D, Alenby, Hound Dogs, Theythom, Electric Giga, Erica Ford, YL01, George Grenville the 7th PM, Jamie Collins, Arvis, Crispy Matthews, Floahay, I Like Rattata, Henry Fint, Amy Hazel, Neas Costa, Faulty Videos, Lyra, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Just Riley, Anna Cabana, Some Trades, The Daily Fugle, Faye, Magic Bite, Shinthia, Sardonic Muse, Dysike, Chris, Root Beer Pants, Queen Eliza, Aerith Emblem, Control Tages, Roman Kromantic, Nick Knack Hammersmack, Mike, Lepton, Cabbage, SUP, Caius Cole, Hasty Glop, Bree, Punch Fighter Champion, Eggman, Maxine the Vampire Queen, Dragonback Lancer, Carrier Has Left, Jill, Angel Nap Caceres, and especially my Jagans, Thick Molder, Adele, Alexander Roper, Siggy, and Cereal Bowl. Without your help, I wouldn't be able to make in-depth videos about random Fire Emblem characters, so I really do appreciate your support. If you want to have your name amongst these lovely people, there is a link to my Patreon below, but please only donate if you can comfortably afford to do so. Regardless of what you choose to do though, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.